This is Chris with Space Cabin Audio, and today on Thinking Like a Drummer, we're going to take a look at the half drag, otherwise known as the Ruff. Let's do it. A half drag is really simple to think about. It's two grace notes followed by an accented note. Now, it could be two 16th notes or two 32nd notes. We're going to start with the 16th note. So I'm going to come over here, and on my snare drum, I'm just going to draw in two grace notes, and then I'll raise up the velocity for the accented note. And because a drummer will usually play the second note a little bit quieter, I'm going to bring this velocity down. Let's take a listen to how this sounds. One more time. There is your 16th note half drag. Now, let's do a 32nd note half drag. I'm going to come over here, change my grid value to 32nd notes, and I'm just going to pop those in, and I'll do the same thing. I'll just drag this way up, give us some hit, and I will bring this down. Let's take a listen to how this sounds now. Back to back, 16th note first, followed by the 32nd note. A lot of drum libraries will ship with a drag articulation, but the reality of it is a drag has a musical mathematical value. So in some cases, those articulations will work, some cases they won't. That's why it's imperative to learn how to program a half drag. Now, let's take this and put it into use. So here I've made a really simple drum fill. Let's take a listen to it. Now that sounds pretty stale. Let's see if we can jazz it up a little using this rudiment. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set my grid to 16th notes. And I'm going to program in two right before the first note, kind of as a pickup. Two grace notes. I'll bring the velocity down because the second hit is usually quieter. Sometimes you'll see it opposite. That's up to you to decide how you want that to sound. I generally will keep it a little quieter. Let's take a listen to this from here. Now, where else could we use this? I'm going to change my grid value to 32nd notes. And right here on this snare drum, I want to give it a little feel. So we're going to use the 32nd note half drag. I'm just going to drag them a little bit different than the first ones because every one is going to be a bit different when a real drummer does it. Let's take a listen now. One more time. Super cool. You'll notice that when we're using the 32nd note version, it starts to sound more like a roll. And a lot of people, when they're programming drums, before they start thinking like a drummer, they're like, a roll, that's just a million hits. We got to put in a million hits here. When in reality, it's only two hits. Okay, now we don't have to keep this just on the snare. For instance, up here on this rack tom, I want to put some in, only I want them to be a little bit louder so we get kind of a more of a roll type feel on this tom. And again, I'll program them just a little bit off. The first one louder, second one quieter. Let's take a listen. One more time. Now this fill is really starting to add up. As we've learned in previous episodes of Thinking Like a Drummer, we can also spread out the rudiment across the kit. We don't have to play it just on one single kit piece. So for instance, right here, I could say that I want a little drag, but I want the kick drum to actually do the grace notes. Now I'm going to turn this kick up just a little bit. And this is kind of pushing the line on what a half drag will be, but it's going to give you an idea about how we can use rudiments to really accent a drum performance. Now, let's take a listen. I'm going to want these up just a little bit louder. Here we go. One more time. Now we've really taken this fill from being stale and given it a little personality. If we wanted to take this further, all we would have to do is go in and move these notes so they're not perfectly on time. We never want anything perfectly on time. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'm going to leave it perfectly on time. But again, if I wanted to change this up just a little bit, I could just put these a little bit late, for instance. Here, I'm going to bring these ones and I'm going to move them up just a little bit early. Although I'm not going to leave them the same amount early, so this one is going to still be early, but not quite. And I'll put this snare just a little bit late. Not much, just a little bit. Now, to give you an idea how this sounds, let's take a listen. Very cool. So now we're starting to add personality. I urge you to do this with all of your drum programming. Go in and finesse the timing. A drummer will never be perfectly on time, and they will never hit the same velocity. You'll notice in here that all of my velocities are always different. Make sure that you're pulling that off in your programming if you want to start to think like a drummer and have your drum programming sound much more realistic. Stay tuned for next week's episode of Thinking Like a Drummer, where we go over another articulation. Talk to you soon. If you like this video, like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Also, check out some of our drum libraries at spacecabinaudio.com.